Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We are so glad you're here to talk about the importance of mental health advocacy with us. Before we get started, we wanted to note just a few housekeeping points. To avoid background noise, all participants will be muted for the duration of the webinar. We'll be addressing questions at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions as the presentation continues, please enter them into the questions box, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen if viewing from a computer, or at the bottom of your screen if you are viewing from a phone. If you have any comments or concerns during the presentation, please also enter these into the questions box. We will review and address any immediate needs as they occur. A recording of the webinar will be emailed to each registrant tomorrow. The recording will also be available on our website at namimd.org and our NAMI Maryland YouTube channel for any individuals that were unable to register or attend today. After the presentation, you'll be asked to complete a short survey on the aspects of the webinar you felt were helpful, could be improved, and what you would like to see in future webinars. We plan to continue hosting educational webinars and advocacy presentations like these, and we ask that you please fill out that survey to let us know how NAMI Maryland can best support you during this time. Now I'd like to hand it over to Kate and our advocacy team.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. And I will be very brief, just to say that we're very, very pleased to be presenting this webinar, one of a number of that will progress. We have as our core speaker, Rob Gargiola, who is a principal for Compass Government Relations and Compass Public Relations, and 4 members of the Compass staff work very closely with us on our policy and advocacy work. So I will just read a couple of sentences about Rob to say that he has nearly 30 years of legislative, lobbying, and advocacy experience at the federal, state, and local levels of government, and over 20 years of practicing law in DC and Maryland. He plays a very major role in managing the Compass leadership team and has done an immensely great job, as has the entire Compass team for us over the last few years. So welcome, Rob. I will now turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Kate. Appreciate the opportunity to be speaking to all of you this morning. Thank you for your time. We're obviously very excited to continue to be representing NAMI and Maryland and all the good work that all of you do in advocating for mental health issues. As many of you know, we just had an election a couple days ago. We're still tabulating some of the returns, particularly due to some of the mail-in ballot counting, but we have a good sense of kind of where things have landed in Maryland, and we wanted to use this opportunity to engage all of you to begin engaging some of these new legislators. Before I get into the advocacy, I did want to do just a quick update on the election that just, as I mentioned, occurred a couple days ago. No surprise, we're going to have a new governor. Governor-elect Wes Moore and Lieutenant Governor-elect Aruna Miller. She's a former delegate, actually served in the same district that I served in when I served in the Maryland Senate. Good friend, looking forward to working with both of them and expect really good things from this new administration, which will take office in the middle of January on a lot of the issues we care about going forward. We're gonna have a new Attorney General, Anthony Brown, a former Lieutenant Governor. He's a current Congressman representing Prince George's County. And we're gonna have a new Comptroller, Delegate Brooke Learman. In the Maryland General Assembly, in the Senate, we're still waiting on a couple of races, but it looks like the numbers aren't really gonna change much. Before the election, we had 32 Democrats and 15 Republicans. It's possible that number changes by 1 in the direction of adding 1 more Democrat. It's also possible that those numbers will maintain at the 32-15 that I mentioned. The one outstanding issue in the Senate that we're waiting on that we'll expect to learn in probably later this month is who's going to chair the Senate Finance Committee, which deals with a lot of healthcare issues, healthcare policy. I would say that's kind of the one unknown at present. We expect the Senate President to announce a new chair. The current chair is retiring at the end of this year, so we're waiting to see who's going to succeed in that role. On the House side, the numbers over there are 99 Democrats and 42 Republicans. We're waiting again on some of the results on a number of those races. It's possible that the Democrats actually gain 1 to 3 more seats in Maryland. It's still a very blue state. We anticipate continued continuity, largely speaking, in the House side. The leadership's not really changing. What I would say is that, and this announcement was made back in April, we are going to have a new chair of the Health and Government Operations Committee, and that's the committee in the House that deals with, essentially health policy, and that's going to be Delegate Jocelyn Pena-Melnick, who's been serving as the vice chair of that committee. She's been an ally in the past, and she's was tapped by the Speaker at the end of April to become the new chair of that committee with the retirement announcement of Shane Pendergrass. On funding side, and we do advocate for funding as well, the Speaker also made an announcement in May for the Appropriations Committee, and that's Delegate Ben Barnes has been elevated chair. So we're going to have 2 chairs going into the next session, with the Money Committee, where the funding is, and in the Health Policy Committee on the House side. But both of them have been long-serving legislators, have been advocates for mental health in the past, and we expect to have a good working relationship with them. I'm going to kind of stop there as far as the election itself. As I mentioned, there are a number of races that we're still waiting to get results on, but largely those are the contours of what we're expecting as we go into the 2023 session. And really, kind of the main reason that we want to engage you today is we want to kick off an advocacy campaign with some of the new legislators that are coming to Annapolis. It's going to be close to 50 new senators and delegates. That's a pretty large number. There are a total of 188 legislators, so 50's not quite a third, but it's well over 25% of the legislature is going to be new people. And many of these folks may not have dealt with the mental health community or really personally focused on mental health issues, and we wanted to be one of the first voices that they hear from as they begin to kind of assume the role of delegate and senator in the coming months. They will all get sworn in on the first day of session in January, which is January 11th. So between now and then, and again, there's a few that we're still waiting to get the results. Are they a delegate elect? Are they a senator elect? There are a few races where we're still waiting to get those results, but most of those races have been decided, and we know who the new delegate elect and the new senator elects are going to be respectively. And so we want to use the month of November and the month of December to outreach to these individuals in their communities. And they are, from all points of the state, from new senator in Western Maryland to new legislators on the Eastern Shore, Prince George's County, Baltimore City, Montgomery County, Central Maryland, Northern Maryland. There are new legislators from all over the state. And what we wanted to do is we want to use this opportunity over these next 2 months before they come to session and get their offices and get sworn in, is to outreach to them. And it's very important to do that. And we want to use these 2 months to do just that. So how do we do that? We have a, and actually, if we can put up, there's a spreadsheet that we will be providing, and I'm going to see if we can get that up on the screen for folks. There we go. So obviously what we want to do is we want to make sure that the NAMI leadership and our team, Compass Advocacy, is aware of outreach that you might do, because there's going to need to be follow-up, and we're going to be engaging with these folks once they get sworn in as well. And so at the front end, if you're interested in reaching out to some of these new legislators, you either live or work in their districts, reach out to us, and we're going to provide you some information, a policy, a paper, a background around mental health, and a few other pointers as well about how best to make use of your time with these legislators. But this list here essentially expresses all of the new incoming senators and delegates. And the highlight yellow that you see indicates that these are races that are not yet called. So, just by looking at it, for example, District 33, lines 7 and 8, there's Sid Saab and Dawn Guile. We're not sure which one of those two is going to be the next senator. We're hoping to know that in the next few days. And to the extent you live in that part of Anne Arundel County or work in that part of Anne Arundel County and want to reach out to one of those two, we're hoping by next week we'll have an answer to who the next senator-elect from that district is going to be. This information here, I know for many of you, you're like, well, where in Anne Arundel County are they? There's a number of ways to figure this out. There's a link that we'll be providing folks where you can type in your address and it'll tell you, are you in District 33? Are you in District 34? What district are you? And that kind of matching process is going to let you know, well, who are my new delegates and senators? And from that process, that's who we would encourage you to reach out to them as a constituent, essentially. And so, how do you do that? Well, this information that's on this sheet provides email addresses and phone numbers. And we would encourage, to the extent that, and this is one of the things that we're going to be facilitating, if there are a number of you that are looking to advocate with a particular senator-elect, we want to make sure that we're coordinating those individuals that are in that district. So it is important to reach out to us. Information is being provided and will be provided about connecting with the NAMI team on that. And then what we'll do is we'll match you up with one or two other individuals to the extent there's additional interest for that particular district. So, if it's just two of you, the two of you can kind of facilitate a meeting with these new delegate-elect and senator-elects. We're also going to be arming you with a couple of other documents. And if we can put the public policy priorities on the screen briefly. We'll get that up. So this here is something that kind of provides broad contours of NAMI Maryland's priorities for the coming year. We're not asking you at this initial meeting in the months of November and December to talk about particular bills or specific bills. And again, the idea is we've got 40 to 50 new legislators. They're not going to necessarily be familiar with bills and legislation quite yet. It really is to talk about kind of broader issues. So this policy priorities is certainly a document that we would encourage you to take with you and leave behind with these legislators. And you can see some of the information on here that kind of provides kind of the broad areas that NAMI Maryland is focusing on as we go to the 2023 session. And then there's one other document, if we can put that up as well, that is kind of a good fact sheet that gives an overview. And again, it's possible some of these legislators have interacted in the mental health community, but it's probably more likely that they haven't. And so the second document is going to be important from an educational standpoint. That's really what we're looking to accomplish. We're looking to kind of make a connection, begin the education process, and hopefully develop a rapport and a relationship with these new legislators, which will be critically important over the next 4 years. If we can get that second document up, please. The mental health in Maryland. Wait a minute till we get that one up so you can see that. There we go. Maybe make that a little larger if possible. So this again just provides a kind of a snapshot of some good pieces of information about mental health in Maryland, and it's a kind of a back and front document. And again, like I said, a lot of these legislators, this initial meeting might be their first introduction to kind of mental health issues. We're not sure, each of them bring different backgrounds and experiences, so it's possible some of them may have greater awareness, but I would say probably most of them will not. And this initial meeting might be the first opportunity for them to learn a little bit about issues related to mental health. We can probably take that down now. So what we're gonna, essentially, those are the two documents that we would encourage you to take to these meetings. And what we're gonna arm you with is, as I mentioned, how do you identify, who are your legislators? And which of these new legislators, are you a constituent of? The second thing is we're gonna help you kind of reach out to them, whether it's by email, kind of putting together an email message to them to get coffee at a local coffee shop, or if they have a campaign office that's still going to be open, meeting them there, or it might even be a virtual meeting. And so all of these things are good things, and there's a document that we're going to be providing kind of how best to outreach to these new legislators, and many of them are going to be interested in meeting with you because they're going to want to learn about the different issues they're going to be facing. So once you get the meeting, what are you supposed to say? And really, I would look at it as, they're a member of the community, they live in the community just like you do. And while, yes, they went through the rigors of a campaign and recently got elected, they likely have other jobs, may have a family, or perhaps are even retired and decided to run, but they've got, they're just like you. And so I would approach it kind of very conversationally, as if you're talking to a friend, obviously being respectful because they're going to be a public official once they get sworn in. And we want to develop kind of a rapport. And so, I think in leading off, and if it ends up being in your particular district that you're the only individual, versus if we team you up with 2 or 3 other people, what I would encourage in the teaming up of 2 or 3 other people is that the 2 or 3 of you have a conversation briefly in advance or perhaps right before the meeting to kind of determine who's going to be the lead speaker, who's going to kind of kick it off. But really, in either circumstance, the lead off is tell them about yourself. Who you are, where you live, where what you do. A little bit about your family to the extent you have, a family in the community, and inquire about them. And it really should be somewhat conversational, just like you would meet a person, at a party, essentially. And I would approach it kind of in that sense. Hi, I'm Rob Garagiola, and I live in Annapolis, and I have 2 children going to this school, and they may say, oh, I have a nephew that goes to that school. And so part of it is looking for the connections, and you'll be surprised many times how many connections you might ultimately have to the new delegate or senator-elect. And then I think once you get into kind of who you are and they have an opportunity to give you a little bit of background about themselves, I think pivoting to, why are mental health issues important to you? And if there's a story or a personal thing that you're, willing to share, or an experience that you're willing to share, I think those can be very powerful. And I think it will demonstrate to the new incoming legislator, why it's important to you and why it should be important to them. And I think sometimes that personal touch and that personal experience, really is going to be what they take away, from that conversation. There may be some circumstances in which the incoming legislator might be able to relate and share either an encounter that they or a family member of theirs have had with the mental health system. And I think, encourage that kind of sharing, and take note of that because, there may be some instances in which the new legislator might have familiarity with the mental health system. And that's going to be an important thing for us to know as we deal with legislation and advocate for legislation on your behalf when the General Assembly convenes in January. And so if they share something like that, take note of that, and share that with us, because the hope being is that they're going to more likely be a champion for mental health issues. But I would say probably most of them may not or have had an encounter or experience with the mental health system. And again, you're going to likely be the first person to introduce them to this. And we're certainly going to want to take advantage of the opportunity to educate them. So, you know, who you are in the community, what you're doing, where you live, you know, I think, you know, kind of the introductory stuff, and then pivoting to why, you know, mental health issues are important to you, or what got you involved, I think is kind of the next thing that you want to cover. And then I think from there, it would be pivoting. I would at that point, once you get past those two things, that's when you can provide, you know, these two documents that we had on the screen earlier. I would not present them at the front of the meeting. I would really use the beginning of the meeting to get to know each other a little bit, so to speak. And then, you know, kind of from your heart, why is this important to you? And then, you know, here are some, you know, data points, information on mental health in Maryland. And by the way, here are our, you know, NAMI Maryland's kind of policy priorities for the 23 session. And I think if, you know, then it's open it up to questions. And if they say, well, what legislation are you supporting? You know, again, I would not necessarily, you might get that. I'm gonna guess less likely, but you might get that. And I think it's easy to say, you know, these are our policy priorities. They're kind of broad policies. There will be a number of bills, dozens of bills, that will be before each of these senators elect and delegate elects in the upcoming session. And I think you can express to them that your NAMI leadership team and your government relations consultants will be following up with those particular legislators if there's particular questions that they have. But you don't need to get into that. I don't think, I would not even encourage you to try to memorize bills from last session or, you know, get into those things. I think really it's meant to be more introductory, educational, and the hope is that this is not just the only meeting or only opportunity that you have to communicate with this new elected official. The hope is that, you know, there's a connection that occurs, and you as a constituent, someone who lives or works in their district, you know, to develop a little bit of a rapport from this initial conversation, and then the follow-up that we do. But the hope is that this relationship continues during the session and next year and the year after. They're going to be in office for 4 years. So we're really looking at this as an opportunity to meet with these folks really at the very beginning, particularly on the House side, the beginning of their political career in Annapolis. A number of the new senators are former delegates, so there's a possibility that they have some background on these issues depending on the committee that they served on. Some of these folks, you know, this is the first time they've held elective office, and this is going to be the first time they've heard about these issues. And then I touched on this, but very important, there's a kind of an after meeting survey or document, straightforward, that we would encourage you to fill out, which will inform us, you know, the meeting did happen, were there issues that the legislator expressed an interest in, and it may be that they're a teacher and education is kind of their focus. Well, that's an important thing for us to know, because there are a number of issues that occur in the schools that we might want to outreach to them on if those issues arise in the coming session, which we do anticipate. Or it might be that they're a lawyer or an engineer or a farmer. I mean, there's, you know, all those things are kind of important little tidbits of information. Or if they've had experience with the mental health system in Maryland. That's really important, because then we know that someone who you know, may have a little more education on these issues. So I'll pause there and see if Kate, if you have other things that you want to touch on, or if there are things, Kate, that you think I might have left out as we do this outreach to these new legislators.
Well, I doubt that you've left out anything particularly, but I will say a couple things. One is that some of you have taken the Smarts for Advocacy training, and in some of the in the first modules, they talk about setting up meetings and all of that. When we talk about roles, if there are more than a certain number of people, then clearly it is important to have roles and to figure those out. It's also important, very important, as Rob has mentioned several times, that we get the information. We will make sure that your affiliate, if you're not going directly through your affiliate, that your affiliate is aware. We will include them, no question. And also, I like the idea that where Rob is saying that this is an introduction. The brief reason why this issue matters to you, why you care, even how quickly, why you got involved in NAMI, why you're there, is really important. There will be opportunities to follow up with, to leave information about what NAMI does. So the policy priorities are there. Those are really important. Also, as the new legislators get into place, as you all know, they will have staff who does constituent relations and gets calls about issues. So knowing that NAMI, the affiliate in your area, and NAMI Maryland as a resource is going to be very helpful. It may or may not be the perfect time to bring it's certainly not the perfect time to bring a whole stack of brochures to the legislator, but it is the introduction. So this will be a very valuable piece, not only for getting legislation and policy work done, but also making sure that people who are reaching out to their legislator for help, that the legislator's office knows that NAMI is here to help. So again, light, personable, personal, and yes.
I don't know if Kate froze on mine.
If there's more, and we really want to make sure that we're coordinating that to be the most effective.
And what I would also add, I mean,
I really
emphasize enough how important this is and how important your role in the success of NAMI Maryland's legislative agenda ultimately is. Now, while we're not getting into specific legislation in this initial outreach, this is critically important. I mean, we're talking, you know, essentially 25 to 30% of the General Assembly is new. And this is going to be an early touch, an early meeting, an early introduction. But again, we hope that with this initial introduction and outreach to these new legislators, that there's an impression made on them about the importance of these issues, which is going to make our job easier in the coming session. But we're going to hope that you stay engaged with that particular legislator. I was a former senator. I served in the Maryland Senate for 12 years. And there were people that I met early on when I first got elected 20 years ago now, amazingly, before retiring, that, you know, were resources for me throughout the 3 terms that I served in the Maryland Senate. And some of those individuals were people that I met very, you know, during the campaign, even before I got elected. And certainly after I got elected, there were relationships that I made that continued essentially throughout the 3 terms that I served in the Maryland Senate. So this is really important, you know, what we're asking you to do, and what we want to be a resource for you for this initial meeting, and we have those resources, but we're looking at this being kind of a long-term thing as well in developing champions. The last thing I would say is, because I don't think I touched on it, is how long of a meeting is this going to be? I would say from an expectation standpoint, what I would suggest is, you know, we're just looking to get, you know, 10, 15 minutes of your time. Typically, unless they've got meetings stacked, which I don't think they're going to have kind of back-to-back meetings at this stage, it very well could go to 20 minutes, or it could be a half hour. But I think when you're making the request, around 15 minutes, whether it's virtual or over coffee or at a campaign office or somewhere else. You kind of go in with that mindset. So as you're thinking through that, you really want to spend, maybe the first 3 to 5 minutes in that introduction phase. If there's 2 or 3 of you there, allow a minute for each of you to express kind of who you are in the community. And then the next segment of that is why, how did you get involved with NAMI Maryland? Or why are mental health issues important to you personally? And that should really kind of be the middle third of the meeting. And at the end of that is when you would present, these 2 documents. And then the last third really is the hope is that's when they're talking and you're listening and you're learning kind of what interests them or whether or not they've been touched, have experiences in the mental health arena as well. So, thank you again. And, we're very excited about presenting this opportunity. And again, it is very, very important.
I guess I'm just going to jump in also just to say that some of you are very knowledgeable and others are newbies or just don't have a whole lot of background in legislative work. I got involved in NAMI a long time ago, many of you know, many, many years ago, and one of the state senators who is retiring this year, or has retired, I met her very early on. Where I went with 2 other people in Baltimore, and I am, some of you don't know, but I really am an introvert. I hate to talk. I hate to be put on the spot or have to ask, I want to prepare everything. And I went somewhat unwillingly. And that person, after I shared just 2 sentences about why I was involved with NAMI and about my sister with schizophrenia, that senator, now senator, shared with me about her personal family situation. And from then on, I and several of those other people were invited to come and speak when there was a group meeting or something. I learned on the job, but I never felt that I had to, except as the executive director, I never felt I had to be the answer person. And as a matter of fact, I still don't. If I don't know the answer, that's a really good question. I'll go back and I'll check, and I or someone else will get back with you. Okay, so it's really, you all know because you're involved with NAMI that just sharing a little bit of yourself makes all the difference. But it can lead to, 25-year relationship that you never thought. You are also not committing to a 25-year relationship. You're just setting the stage. Okay, so thank you. We have some chats, and I was wondering if someone, let's see, we have some questions. So how do we want to do this? I can read them. Yes, this webinar is being recorded and will be available later. And we hope you feel free to, we will probably be showing it again to several small groups, but also you are welcome to. How can we best advocate for more mobile crisis units and crisis stabilization care centers in Maryland, as well as advocating for funding the response to 988 calls and texts? Well, that's certainly a core issue that is being addressed now before the legislative session and will be. Rob, do you want to jump in here at all?
Yeah, look, if there's a particular issue that is really important to you, kind of the order of sequence, I would put that right after you provide the policy priorities and the other one pager. And I think at that point you can pivot and say, for me, if it's mobile crisis units and 988, touch on it and explain why it's important to you. But I think where you pivot from on that is just planting that seed to them that's important to you, not getting into kind of the legislative history of it, not getting into what the legislation might look like in the coming session. To the extent they have follow-up questions on that, I think, engage the NAMI staff and us, and we can follow up with them specifically. But I'm guessing, with these new incoming legislators, it's going to be kind of very kind of 30,000-foot discussion as opposed to really getting into the details of some things. There might be some circumstances where someone might want to get in the details, but I would pivot away from that for this initial meeting.
And I would just add that we will be doing presentations and all sorts of things on some of these topical issues as the legislative session approaches and during the legislative session as well as after, around not only where we stand and what the issues are, what's happening, where we stand, and what the messaging can be. And we'll be sending out advocacy alerts and a variety of other things. This is, as Rob said, the chance to just be memorable, to make a contact. And yes, I would, if you have a particular issue that's particularly important to you, you can mention the topic. It's very valuable. It will be the first time maybe some of them have heard of it, or maybe they've heard a lot. But then I would leave the detail for later, especially since things are changing. But it also might be a little bit overload for them. Let's see, well, you got great webinar. Thank you, Rob. As a very new member of NAMI and advocacy, do you think I can gather enough material to help from a connection with the senators? For this meeting? Absolutely, I think so.
Yeah, and I would say, it's the two documents that we referenced, I think, are good introductory documents for purposes of this initial meeting. NAMI Maryland hosts a number of advocacy webinars throughout the year. And again, the General Assembly session is going to be January 11th, and it's going to last 90 days to the early middle part of April. And there's going to be a number of advocacy opportunities to really get in the weeds on some of the legislation that we're going to be championing. And hopefully many of you can participate in that as well. We're going to be doing some virtual meetings when the session comes up, and we're also going to be doing some live in-person meetings. But we do this throughout the year, but there's a unique opportunity with elections occurring in Maryland every 4 years for all office holders that we're pivoting a little bit to really developing that relationship with a lot of the new folks is kind of the focus right now on the heels of this election. And I think presenting two documents is probably just the right amount for these initial meetings.
Mm-hmm. See. So, of course, to prepare for advocacy, how can I find it? And someone answered, there are some of our affiliates that are doing the new module that was a combination of the first and second. It's called Smarts for Advocacy. In addition, NAMI Maryland will be producing some for those areas that do not have that course, and we do the training for the teachers. There was a little bit of a delay because National put a hold on it, and they've released the new for one module. But now I'm proud to say that we have a new module that is specifically on crisis and 988, and we will be. I'm a national trainer, and so I have just received the overview and training, and we will be scheduling that. I will tell you that that is not only, that can be helpful. It is not the only thing that is effective for legislative advocacy, because when we have specific, it will be more broad about what is happening with 988 and crisis and why it's important in the country. At that point, if we do train people, then we can provide them with what is currently happening in Maryland. But you do not have to have that training to, one, develop a relationship, to find out what the legislator is interested in, and then as things, as you want to learn more about things, you can take advantage of some of the resources. But again, the most valuable thing I learned from being a grassroots constituent is that you make it real, and then you make that connection, and then you can hand off. You don't have to know everything. You can hand it off. And we've got, I mean, NAMI Maryland staff is very knowledgeable, but we have an amazing team that's right there at the legislature, who can really do the deep, wonky work. Sorry. Did we have any, but we will be putting an announcement out about Smarts for Advocacy soon, and do check with your local. I think there's 2 or 3 local larger affiliates that do provide the Smarts for Advocacy training. We will be providing it virtually through NAMI Maryland for the rest of you. But to pivot back, there were a certain number of you on this call. I know that we're recording this. I hope that you will feel free to share this at your local, with your local groups, but also to engage other people once you've decided what you want to do and who you want to reach out to and who's your new legislator. But also think about who in your affiliate, in your area, might also be appropriate, or for someone who's maybe you're in Western Maryland and there's several senators and delegates who are new. I don't remember, but so maybe you want to find someone in their district for us who is involved with NAMI. That really matters. That has the story. So I think that is it. We've got a good group of people here. So we will be following up. Rob, did you have any, I don't see any more questions, but did you have any last comments? And I do want to remind people that there will be a follow-up with information and an opportunity to express interest. If you are if you're going to show this recording to other people or recruit other people, please have them make sure that they get we have an ability to give them the interest sheet so we can track this.
There are, Kate, there are 2 questions that came in right as you were talking.
Really? Okay.
One is from Diana, who asks, thank you for the answers. How do we sign up for a specific district?
Right. So Rob, do you want to handle that, or shall I?
Yeah, there's a document that it will be provided if it hasn't been provided. That'll provide a link, so you can type in your address to know what district you live or work in, and then you can match it to the other sheet that we had up there. I'll just kind of put it on the screen here, so you know that it was that sheet there. And basically, you're drawing a match. And look, if at the end of the day, you live in a district where there's not a new legislator, that's okay. Reach out to the incumbent who's been there. You know, the focus is outreach to new legislators, and we really want to encourage that. But if you live in a district and you know the 3 delegates and the 1 senator have been in office for many years, and you haven't sat down with them, sit down with them, have a conversation with them as well. So that information about identifying what district am I in and how do I match up with the legislator, that information is in the document that will be provided.
Right.
And then one final question, which I think is an important one, is who should they contact if they have additional questions or want more information?
So I would suggest, and bear with me, we're in the process of doing a lot of technology changes at our office, but if the email advocacy@NAMIMD is, active, which it should be, I would send something to advocacy@NAMIMD. That way we are sure that it gets to the right people, but you can always just send it to, me or one of the staff that you have a contact with. I am at ed@namimd.org, but advocacy@namimd.org should also be active, and we will ensure that right after this call.
Yeah,
okay, and
active
so.
Okay,
so and if you could put that in the chat, that would be really helpful, because I don't seem to be able to. Good question. I'm excited.
Yeah, and just to kind of close, again, thank you for taking the time this morning. It's an exciting time in Maryland. There's a lot of great opportunities with some new legislators, new incoming governor, new administration, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with all of you in the coming months and years ahead. And the last thing I would say is, in kind of kicking this off, we would encourage folks, to start thinking about outreach into legislators as early as next week. Obviously, we have Thanksgiving around the corner. When you reach out to them, they might have availability immediately, but it could also be late November after Thanksgiving, or even in early December, and that's fine. And so kind of the window we're looking at would be really kind of starting next week until about the middle of December. I think is like really a good time to reach out to these folks.
Right, and so I would piggyback with that and say that the sooner you fill out you check that link, see where your who is your delegate and senator, and then fill out that interest form so we know who wants to go to who. We will then get right on it. We hope we will not be in any way anything that slows it down, but you have time also. I also would just point out that for the first time in my entire life, everybody is talking about mental health. So you're going to have an audience. It's everybody knows this is an issue, and so you can expect to be talking to somebody and getting their ear, and we're excited. So thank you.
Thank you.
I guess let's leave it open for a couple more minutes in case there's any other final things, but I think we'll end the actual recording now, and thank everybody for attending, and we can't wait to get your interest forms. Thanks again. They'll be following as soon as this is over, very shortly, you will get an email with that information. Okay, thanks again. And thank you, Rob and team.
Thank you.
Yep, and just a reminder to everybody, a recording of the webinar will be emailed to all registrants tomorrow, and it will also include that link and those 2 documents that we discussed. The recording will also be available on our website at namimd.org and on our NAMI Maryland YouTube channel for anybody who is unable to attend today.
Thanks again.
All right.